Thank you very much for talking to Moneycontrol. We're in conversation with Mathias Cormann, the Secretary General of the OECD. Thank you very much for talking to us. What's the mood like this year? The WEF released a report today where, it said that two-thirds of the economists that it surveyed expect a recession. What's the mood like at Davos this time around?
Well, the OECD is not forecasting a recession as our central scenario. I mean, we released our last global economic outlook in November, and we predicted a significant slowdown in global growth to 2.2% in 2023. But since then, the global environment has actually become somewhat more benign. Headline inflation has eased on the back of lower than anticipated energy prices and also lower food prices than at their peak. In fact, some energy prices are now even below where they were before the war of aggression against Ukraine got underway. So, I mean, our view is quietly optimistic. There's a lot of work still to be done to deal with short-term pressures. There's a lot of work to be done in particular to deal with medium to longer-term challenges. But we are quietly optimistic.
Of all the challenges, what's been playing on your mind the most? Because we are coming off what many economists call a polycrisis year. The Ukraine war, record inflation, climate-linked disasters, and so on. While you say things could be getting a little benign, what's really keeping you awake from a macro point of view?
Well, I mean, there is significant level of uncertainty and there are significant downside risks. There's no question. I mean, the world has gone through a 1 in a 100-year pandemic. I mean, the COVID pandemic, obviously, with some lingering effects. We've got the economic and social impact of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, high inflation, high energy prices, high food prices, supply chain pressures, and of course geopolitical tensions. What we say is that what the world needs more than ever is increased global cooperation, increased and better international cooperation. Of course, this year with India holding the G20 presidency, there is a great opportunity for India to help the world come closer together and work better together to solve the challenges and opportunities of our time.
Right. In fact, I was going to ask you, how does OECD look at India vis-a-vis China as an investment destination in the post-pandemic world?
Well, India has been growing very strongly. We expect growth to moderate slightly, but India's growth will still be very strong by international standards. And of course, India is a strong, robust democracy and a trading economy. I mean, we see India continuing to grow strongly into the future, even though over the next year or two, growth will be slightly lower than what it has been in the past. But India is one of the largest economies in the world. It's a key player in the G20, and indeed in 2023 holds the G20 presidency. So there's a lot of opportunity for India this year to help shape the global agenda.
Right. While the world is recovering from a pandemic, the World Bank has cut its expectations of global GDP by almost half to 1.7. And, there are multiple crises in Europe, inflation and so on. In such a scenario, what would your message to policymakers be around the world?
Well, we've got to continue to respond intelligently to short-term pressures caused by the pandemic, caused by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, caused by supply chain pressures around the world. We've got to continue to respond intelligently. We've got to get inflation under control. We've got to provide fiscal support in a way that doesn't add to the inflation problem. And we need to tackle the structural challenges the world is facing, the green transition, the digital transformation of our economies, and indeed making sure that we have a global rules-based trading system in good working order. The challenges and the issues that are causing problems should be resolved through cooperation and dialogue.
Right. The OECD also in December, I think, finalized a framework on how government can access citizens' personal data held by private companies. So, how should India adopt similar frameworks? How do you see this panning out in other economies?
Well, cross-border data flows with trust. Governments being able to trust and businesses and individuals being able to trust the cross-border flow of data is going to be very important to optimize the digital economy of the future. More and more trade across borders will involve transfer of data, and indeed countries need to be able to trust that other countries are treating data of their citizens in an appropriate fashion. And the guidelines that the OECD has released seeks to provide that reassurance that countries who sign on to those standards, countries that act consistent with those standards, can be trusted to receive data from all of the participating countries. And ultimately that will help facilitate the strongest possible growth in digital trade.
Right. Final couple of questions. I think the OECD also ranked India among the lowest, along with countries such as China and Saudi, in terms of data restrictions. So now that the government is talking about easing data localization norms, can we expect a better ranking for India?
Well, I mean, obviously, normal processes will get underway, but we welcome the decisions that India are making to take these steps, and we will continue to assess the information as it comes through.
Right. Finally, what are you hopeful and fearful about when it comes to the world as you see it in 2023?
Well,
Do you think re-globalization is a possibility at all?
Well, I think that re-globalization is a must. What I'm hopeful is that countries, having not had as much opportunities in the past during the pandemic to engage with each other, engagement through Zoom and through digital means is not the same as meeting with each other in person. I'm hopeful that the world will find ways to collaborate better again and to, through dialogue, solve the challenges of our time.
On that note, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you.